Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today I'm featuring Ghired, Mirror of the Wilds. He's a 3 mana 3/3 with haste, and non-token creatures you control have tapped them, create a token that's a copy of target token you control that entered the battlefield this turn. If you can curve out Ghired and immediately use him to copy one of your tokens, you have already created a lot of value, and this is what we are going for in this deck. We want to create an army of tokens and simply overwhelm our opponents. Cards that we want to use Ghired's ability with are, for example, Emara, Sword of the Accord. A 2 mana 2/2, and whenever she becomes tapped we create a 1/1 White Soldier creature token with lifelink. Her triggered ability is extremely powerful because it really just cares about her becoming tapped. And when we use Emara to use Ghired's ability, we already create a token, but always remember that you cannot copy the token that you create with Emara's trigger, because you need to target a token as soon as you use this ability. Willy Duke, 8/10 hero, a 3 mana 4/2 with Vigilance, and whenever he becomes tapped you gain 1 life and draw a card. Due to the fact that he has Vigilance, it is not that easy to do, but if Ghired gives him the ability to tap to create a token copy of a token, you just found yourself a value engine. Za Ojanen, Scion of Efrava, a 5 mana 4/4 with Domain, and whenever Za Ojanen, Scion of Efrava becomes tapped, put a 1-1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. The maximum that we can hit with this ability is 3, but as you have seen earlier, Emara will help us to create an army of 1/1 tokens, which we can then pump up every time we tap Za Ojanen. Magda, Brazen Outlaw, a 2 mana 2/1, and other dwarfs you control get +1/+0, and whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token. You can also sacrifice 5 treasures to search a library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Magda is a very powerful card on herself, and especially as one of the 99 in this deck, because you can bring her out on turn 2, maybe you're also able to attack with her in turn 3 to create a treasure token, bring Ghired out and then simply generate a lot of value. Armored Scrapgorger, a 2 mana 0/3, and it has +3/+0 as long as it has 3 or more oil counters on it. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and whenever Armored Scrapgorger becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on Armored Scrapgorger. Not only is this a great mana dog, but it also is graveyard hate against your opponent's decks, and in combination with Ghired you also create a bunch of tokens. Scaretiller, a 4 mana 1/4, and whenever it becomes tapped, choose 1. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, or return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Depending on how many lands you have in hand, you can really accelerate your game plan with this card by using it to create tokens of tokens, and when you do that you also bring lands into play. And now let's talk about how we create tokens that we can copy. For example with Bramble Sovereign, a 4 mana 4/4, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield you may pay 2 mana. If you do, that creature's controller creates a token that's a copy of that creature. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, a 5 mana 2/2 with haste, and you can tap him to create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That token gains haste, and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Who would have guessed that this card is played in this deck? Felden of the Third Path, a 3 mana 2/3, and you can tap 3 mana, tap him to create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. As you are trying to create a powerful board state, your opponents will definitely try to handle your board by using some board wipes or single target interaction, so using your graveyard as another resource, especially in Naya colors, is extremely powerful. Flame Shadow Conjuring, a 4 mana enchantment, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control you may pay 1 red. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste and exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Orpheon, Hero of Lavabrink, a 4 mana 3/3, and you can pay 2 mana and tap him to create a token that's a copy of another creature you control. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step and activate only as a sorcery. You can also pay 9 mana, tap him to create 5 tokens that are copies of another target creature you control. They gain haste and sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, which you can also only activate as a sorcery. I only managed to pull off his second ability once in my life so far, so I think that you should definitely focus on his first ability as it is way cheaper and will already generate enough value in this deck. Jax is the Troublemaker, a 4 mana 2/3 and you can pay 1 red, tap him, discard a card to create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. It gains haste and when this creature dies, draw a card. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step and activate only as a sorcery. You can also blitz Jax in for 2 mana. Jaxus is a great card in this deck as he also generates a little bit of card draw as soon as the token copy of another target creature dies, and in addition to that you just got yourself a token which you can create a token copy of. So now let's talk about a few bombs that we want to copy. For example, Vaultborn Tyrant, a 7 mana 6/6 with trample, and when it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you gain free life and draw a card. When it dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. I'm just starting to realize how often I'm featuring Vaultborn Tyrant in all of my deck tags, and it's simply because it is such a powerful card, which is why you should definitely consider playing this card. Terror of the Peaks, a 5 mana 5/4 with flying, and spells your opponent's cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional free life to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Terror of the Peaks is a known combo piece in a lot of different decks and it can definitely do a lot of damage in this deck too. Gruff Triplets, a 6 mana 3/3 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of 1/1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. Fellhide Spiritbinder, a 4 mana 3/4 with Inspired, so whenever it becomes untapped you may pay 2 mana. If you do, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of another target creature, except it's an enchantment in addition to its other types, it gains haste and exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Flame Rush Rider, a 5 mana 3/3, and when it attacks, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature that's tapped and attacking. Exile the token at the end of combat. You can also dash this creature in for 4 mana. Professional Facebreaker, a 3 mana 2/3 with Menace, and whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Definitely keep in mind that treasure tokens are also tokens which you can copy with Ghired's ability. You can also sacrifice a treasure to exile the top card of your library and you may play that card this turn. Always keep in mind that it says you may play that card, so you can also play lands with this ability. I'd like to mention a few other powerful legendary creatures in this deck. Benny Bragg's Zoologist, a 4 mana 3/2 with Convoke, and at the beginning of each end step, if you created a token this turn, draw a card. Galtan Maverin, a 7 mana 12/12 with Trample, and whenever you attack, choose one. First of all, definitely keep in mind that it isn't Galtan and Maverin that needs to be attacking, and you can choose between create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with Trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures. You can also create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. And when it comes to going white in an Naya strategy, you definitely play Jetmir, Nexus of Revels, a 4 mana 5/4, which says creatures you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance as long as you control 3 or more creatures. Creatures you control also get +1/+0 and have trample as long as you control 6 or more creatures. And last but not least, creatures you control also get +1/+0 and have double strike as long as you control 9 or more creatures. You want to win more, you get it. Idol of Oblivion, a 2 mana artifact which you see in a lot of decks nowadays, and you can tap it to draw a card, activate only if you created a token this turn. You can also pay 8 mana, tap it and sacrifice it to create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. On the first look it isn't the most powerful card in this deck, but it will definitely provide you a lot of value as it is an artifact which isn't touched that often by your opponents. But over the whole course of the game you will definitely draw a lot of cards with this card, and depending on the situation you can still create a very powerful colorless Eldrazi creature token which you can also copy in this deck. Sandstorm Salvager, a 3 mana 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. You can also pay 2 mana and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature token you control. They gain trample until end of turn. This 3 mana creature is definitely a powerful threat to your opponents as it can give you all of your creature tokens trample, which might end in a really powerful overrun effect. And coming to the last card, it is Midnight Guard, a 3 mana 2/3, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, untap Midnight Guard. If Midnight Guard isn't summoning sick and you can use Ghired's ability with it to create a token copy of something, you will make another creature enter the battlefield, which will untap Midnight Guard, which you then can use to create a token of another creature token. And I guess from now on you see where this is going. You can make infinite creature token copies of something, and then you just need to throw in an Impact Tremors to win the game on the spot. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Ghired, Mirror of the Wilds. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.